Okay, hi everyone. This is Chevis Watkinson again, and we are doing the second part of the concept modeling for Art to Part. Now, if you haven't seen the first video, we've walked through a few things such as having a plan of attack and determining what parts you need to build. Also, what we're doing is we're using this Audi pedal cart here that you see as a example for what we're going to build, and we're making the assumption that this is a concept rendering and that it is either our design and we have to 3D model it, or it is a design that was given to us and we need to 3D model it from the sketch that another designer provided to us. So with that said, we had determined that the first thing we wanted to model up was the tires. And the reason for that, the logic behind it, because I'm a big fan that we should always have logic behind what we're doing, is that tires really define a whole lot in the car. You know, the location of the tires, provide the length of the body and the proportions, the width of the body, and then also it's going to help us to define the height proportionately based off of the overall diameter or the height of the tire. So as we're doing this, since we're going to make some assumptions that we don't have detailed drawings and that we're going off of that sketch, we're going to really need the position of the tires to help us define the form. So with that said, what I have done is I have started up a sketch for the elevations of the tires. Now, what we want to do here is to have basically a plan of attack on how we're going to build this tire. And it's not an overly complex product or part for the car, but we still want to think about or get in the habit of thinking about how are we going to build this before we go to the 3D modeling so that we're not trying to figure it out while we're in the 3D model. So what we've done is we've created a sketch, and this is just going to be a reference sketch. What we're going to use it for is to bring this image here into SolidWorks, and we'll put it onto a sketch plane so that we have something to trace over or to make it a lot easier from a dimensional standpoint in creating drawings. So with that said, reference means that it's not going to be 100% precise and that we're going to have to do some adjustments and details for that because it is based off of this tire here that we've drawn. So while we dive into this, what I like to do is sit there and say, okay, what are all the different things of this that I see that I'm going to need to worry about? So first is, it's a circle, let's extrude it. But if we look at that and we get into the finer details, you've got a crown here. So if we were just to simply extrude it, what we would end up with from a cross section is this part here. And then we could go in and add giant radiuses to make this round. But that would not necessarily give us the look here where it's an arc with a smaller radius. We could also say, oh, you know what? We're going to sweep over something on there and do a sweep revolve. Now, these are all great things, but it seems or feels like it's getting a little bit complicated. So again, you want to make sure you can break it down into its basic approach so that you're using the most simplified tools and methods to get your product built. Again, this is why we work through it in our head or on some paper. So if I look at this, I'm going to say the biggest thing is I can do a simple revolve of a 2D profile that looks like this. Now, whether I put that radius in the sketch or whether I do it as a hard point or a hard corner and add the radius later, we'll get into the different logics of that. But if I look at it, we now have the overall shape of the tire, but we're then going to have to do several cuts, several extrudes, and we also have this contour that comes and dives in, such as this. So if I look at that, I could sit there and say, okay, well, after I revolve this, I could do an extrude cut to get that bottom area removed. Now, it feels like that is an added step. So what if I was to simply go and do my revolve in a 2D profile and get that shape in there right off the bat? That's going to give me that contour that I've got. It's going to allow me to have my larger radius. I can then also come in and do the back detail and get what I want from that profile all in one shot. And again, do I add the radiuses now in the profile sketch or later? You know, we'll talk about that once we get into 3D modeling. Now, when we come back and we look at these cuts that we have, basically, that's going to be a series of cuts. Plus, since it's all symmetrical, we can do a rotational pattern. So what that means is we can draw this, and then based off of a center line, you know, rotate it around the center and do multiple cuts at once, all with a pattern. And then we can do this one as well, or we can do these two together. All depends. And sometimes, you know, once you get into the model, you might figure out a better way to do it. But again, we have a plan of attack. We also look at this and say, okay, hey, we're going to need to add draft to these cuts in order to have it pull off the tool. That can be done either in the extruded cut or it can be done afterwards, but we just have to make sure that we're aware of that. So, with that said, we've kind of got our plan of attack. We're going to do a revolve. We're going to do some cuts, and we'll just call those extrudes. We're going to have some radii that we're going to need to put in. We're going to have to do some 2D sketches. We're also going to need to do some revolve cuts. And what that's for is that's going to be for the tread that we want to get in there. We're going to have to do a whole bunch of fillets. And then we're going to have some additional little things going on down in here. Now, if I look at the best plan of attack, so more than likely I'm going to do my revolve first. I'll do my extruded cut second. We'll add the radii third. And then we'll do our extruded cuts probably fourth. So that gives us that understanding. And now we can move in and get this 2D profile into SolidWorks to use as a reference. Okay, so we want to do that and get this into the reference. Now, a great trick is if you know what the diameter of this object is. And for this, we are making the assumption that this is going to be 16 inches high. When you bring it into SolidWorks, you're going to want to scale it. So since we know what this diameter is, you bring that into SolidWorks and it's going to bring in all the information and all the sizes. So if I bring it in, such as this is the dimension it's going to give us from here to here. Now, what I can do is I can bring it in and do a crop that goes straight from that edge. Let me just get that better here. So there we've got it. It matches up perfectly. We'll hit yes. we'll go File, Save As. We're going to do it as an RGB because, or a JPEG, because SolidWorks will only take JPEGs for the sketch image planes. It does not take a TIFF or anything like that. So there we've got our tire reference image. We'll hit save. And then we're going to open up SolidWorks and bring it into there. Okay, so we've got our reference sketches all ready to go. What we want to do next is create the planes that we're going to put things on. So for all intents and purposes, we've decided that from inside wheel well, the car is going to be 24 inches wide. So what we want to do is just start and get our planes that we're going to project our images onto. So we're going to go into Insert, Reference Geometry, Plane, and what we want to do is 12 inches because the tire is going to come out this way. So let's just do that. Also good to get into the habit of referencing what your planes are, just as we get into larger part modeling. It just helps to be organized. So let's just go with, we'll just say tire plane. We can turn off caps for later. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to create a sketch. Now, since we created our sketch and we added some proportions to it, or we made sure that it was proportionally accurate, we can come in and let's just do a few little construction things. So we said that our sketch was going to be 16 inches in diameter, or sorry, our tire. So let's just get our reference geometry, 2D reference geometry in there. So that's going to make it 16. We'll scale that up. And then I also like to just make sure I have my access points all in. Make sure it's there, because when I do my modeling or my sketching, I want to make sure I have those references. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to bring in, and we're going to go to Tools, Sketch Tools, and we're going to go Sketch Picture, bring us to our folder, and we're going to grab our reference image. So here it is. Now the nice thing is we cropped this so the outside edge is to the outside edge. What that allows us to do is over here, when we want to adjust the size of the picture, we are only adjusting what the diameter is of this tire. So if we sit here and say, okay, well, we want that to be 16. You can see now that by making that 16, ensuring that we have lock aspect ratio on, that we've got the diameter of the tire. If you had extra space, you would have had to done the old-fashioned, pull, push, adjust, and adjust. So that's just kind of a nice little handy trick. At the same time, we want to get this centered. Because we know that this is 16 dead on, we're going to adjust and make it -8 is going to give us our center on our X, and we'll position this on our Y as -8 as well. And what that does is it gives us our image alignment. Now, again, keeping in mind, this is reference geometry or reference image. Once we start doing our 2D sketch layout, we may find that we didn't sketch it right, or the proportions may not be right. We know the design intent, so we're going to make sure that we follow through with our dimensional sketches. Now, just to speed things up, I've already added in the reference for the tires, or for the side profile. So let's start with that, since we decided that we were going to do a revolve of the tire. So what we want to do is select that front plane. We're going to create a sketch on there. We'll select it. We're going in. Now, variety of things that we can do in approaches. When do you add the radiuses? When do you add the cuts? We'll talk about that as we go through this. Again, very first thing I like to do is to create my construction lines. So for all intents and purposes, we're just going to quickly, block this in. Let's start with the top part here first. You can see that this is not just a standard radius, but we may just want to do that. I'm not sure. So let's start by roughing our sketch in here. We're going to say that this is where that radius is going to end. We'll just draw this straight down. What we'll do next, we'll get the width in here, draw that straight up. What we can do to make sure that these are at the same point, we'll draw a construction line across. We want to make sure, even though I snapped, always go in, as I've taught before, build, evaluate, refine. So you can see that we're not necessarily horizontal. So let's just make that horizontal. And then what we want to do too is we're going to draw in this arc here. So you'll see, since I've snapped these together, I can move them up and down simultaneously. We're going to come in quickly and do our arc. And you can see that, oh, that does not look like what we want, even with the radiuses. So the nice thing is that we can just grab our lines here and we can adjust it, raise it up, and then what we can do is we can start getting things to look the way we want approximately. So we're going to just say that that's going to be good enough for now. We're not going to worry about doing curvature continuous and all that for the radiuses. So we talked about whether or not we would push our rear wheel cutout as a separate feature or within the sketch. The nice thing about the more you can do in a sketch is the fewer commands you have to do later, and you can adjust things all in one area. So with that said, let's toss this wheel cutout into our profile. We're going to draw a line here. We'll have it drop down to here. And then let's toss in some dimensions. So we're going to go from here to here, and we're going to say it's going to be 1.25. Now again, I've always gone through the analogy that let's make life easier for our friends downstream. So doing these dimensions where it is 1.2513, it takes no effort for us just to round them off to get what we want. Makes life easier when the engineers have to work on it, or a prototyper, model maker, whatever. So let us do that. Then we're also going to want to add in a dimension here because we're going to want that to have draft. Before we do that, let's just trim up this line. Now we're going to come in and we're going to add draft. So 90 degrees, draft pops up. Oh, it gives us that the dimension selected is a driven dimension. Its value cannot be changed. So what that means is this lines have to be 90 degrees. Well, we've already defined that. How did we define that? Because that's not what we want. So let's go back and take a look. So we've got this. Something is telling us that this is already defined as it's going to be 90 degrees. Well, if we look at our existing relations, okay, that line says it has to be vertical. We see that down there. So this line says it also has to be horizontal. So we can't actually adjust this. It's overridden. So whenever you have that dimension is driven, just go back and take a look and see what your things are. You can also see there's an angle in there, but it's grayed out. So let's just go in and we'll delete that horizontal command. And let's toss that back in. So now you can see it's going to allow us to adjust it. So let's go in and we're going to go 92 degrees. And it adjusts it. Now we can also go back into this and get rid of the old one. it's always going to stay there and not going to be able to change. But for the intents of this part, we're going to say 2-degree draft. So we've got that. Now, I'm not going to add my radiuses in because I like to add those ones in afterwards so that I can see them in 3D, and if I want to adjust or make them bigger or smaller, I don't always have to go back to a sketch and then back to the model. Not to say that for some of these other radiuses that aren't hidden, that you could do that. So let's next go in and we're going to create our profile for our spline that comes in and is going to create the actual rim part. Okay, so but before we do that, I'm noticing that it is hard for me to see my lines, especially blue on blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to exit out of this sketch quickly. I'm going to come back. I'm going to look at my side reference. I'm going to click on the sketch picture. And let's just go and add transparency. We'll say for the full image. We don't want to go that high because it's disappeared. But let's adjust it so that we can see it a little bit better. We'll exit out of that, accept it. And now we're going to come back and we'll edit our sketch. So here you can kind of see things are a little bit more clear. So what I want to do is toss in some quick lines just as reference. So we may or may not have these already defined, but let's just drop them in. We'll hit select. And this is what we're going to use to trim this back. Now I've got where the rim is going to start. I also have it showing down here where it's going to stop. So let us, because we want to make sure that we're drawing something in tangent. So let's adjust that down. And I'll show you in a second here why I'm not necessarily dimensioning this quite yet. Because again, like mentioned, this is still kind of reference image and we're still trying to get the proportions right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a spline tool and I'm going to use the style spline because I like to edit with points and we can get that in later. My first dot allows me to ensure that it is tangent to this line, but then I want to be able to adjust a few points in between. So we're just going to add 2 for now. And we'll come down and we'll add the last one. Now, again, this may look straight. We want to make sure that we add our relationships. So we're going to take this. First, let's actually anchor that. If not, when we add the relationship, it's going to not know what one to move. So we're going to start with that. We'll go there. We'll add that. And you can see how the first control point moved so that it is perfectly vertical with our construction line. What that means is I cannot move it left or right, only up or down. That prevents me from having that crease where this surface meets. Now we want to do the same for up here. And again, you know, do we have things right? I think I've forgotten to do a few dimensions on there. But let's get some quick dimensions in here now as we speak. So we're going to come in, we'll dimension this overall. We'll go with 4.5, and then we still want this to be center, so we're going to go here, put a dimension in. I'm a big fan of doing the least amount of math as I can, so 4.5 divided by 2 gives us that. So don't always have to toss dimensions in as you're doing it, because you can still pull and drag your lines around to make life easier, but you do want to get them in before you start going too far so that it's easy to go back and adjust, or if someone else has to open up your model, they can look at it as well. So now, since we're going to be playing with this curve and the spline points, let's just go in, right click, and we're going to turn on our show curvature combs just so that we can see what's going on. We know that we don't want the rim sticking out further outside of the tire face. So what this does is allows us to say, even if it's so slightly, we now know that this curve at a certain point comes out past this line. So this is just a great way to help make sure that, you know, you're staying within. What we can do is we can adjust these lines so that we can play with a little bit. Now, since we're just kind of doing this, it'll be up to you guys to, you know, refine your curves, refine your lines. I'm not going to play too much. As a guy who loves styling, who loves making sure I get the right curve in there, I can push and pull these points for quite a while before I realize or determine that it's right. So we're going to say that for all intents and purposes, this is good enough. Let us just turn that curvature chrome off. We'll kind of take a quick look, make sure that we're happy with it. You know what? I think that maybe this is a little bit too far, this sidewall. So, but that's why I do the construction lines. So you can see that I can now grab that point and move it up and down without having to worry about, you know, anything else. So this is where maybe I don't want to put a dimension in yet because I still want to play with it. So I'm gonna leave that free for now. We've got everything we want. Let's close this off. We're not going to add these radiuses here or here. So now we're ready to revolve our part. So one of the things when we go to revolve our part, you know, we need an access line. But since we're actually going to be using this center of the tire for a variety of things, what I like to do is where I can toss in some reference geometry. So let's just go in here quickly. We're going to go Insert, Reference Geometry, and we're going to go with an axis. So what we need to do first, select that we want to do two planes. We're going to go with the top plane and the front plane. So you can see that there. Now what that just allows us to do is to reference it versus having to go into the sketch all the time, and we're positive of where it is that it's at the origin. So let's just go with front axis. We'll call it that. You can also see that we did not name this, so let's just go with tire revolve. With that said, okay, we're going to come in, use our revolve command, and we'll use this sketch. We're going to select the axis here, and we've done our revolve. We also noticed that we did a slight spelling mistake in our sketch. So again, you know, it may not seem much, but professionalism counts. So we want to make sure that we do things correctly. So we're going to toss in there. So now that we've got our base body of our tire ready to go, what we want to do next is add in our cutouts. So with that said, what we're going to do is to create the profiles in a 2D sketch that we can cut out. With that, what we're going to do is we're going to build it off of the front face of the tire here. So let's just come in, we're going to right click, and we're going to create a new sketch. We can go to the front. I don't think we necessarily need the tire in here to see what we're doing, so we'll hide that. You can see that we've got our sketch here. We're going to use that as our reference. So we're going to start dropping this in. Now, keep in mind again, like mentioned before, this sketch is a reference. It can't be used as gospel. If we start dimensioning things out, it may be that the sketch is a little bit off, so we want to go with the 2D geometry that is better defined. So to start with this, we want to set up some of our construction lines again. So let's just get that in there. You can also see that we're going to have a complete radius here that we're going to want to trim around. So let's just toss that in. Let's just toss a quick dimension on it. Okay, 12.34. I think that can be safely convert it to 12.35, and no one's going to know the difference of that. So the very first thing, you can already see that our sketch isn't necessarily perfect. So what we want to do is just block in this first shape. With that said, let's just go with a quick rectangle that we can trim back. We'll dimension that up. So I like to do the least amount of math as possible. So 1.5 divided by 2, and it gives us our position that we want. Now we want to add in our 3-point arc. So let's just toss in with a construction line here so that we know where the ends of our arc are going to be. So we can trim this back, or we can convert it into construction geometry. You can kind of see that we have our arc. It's not tangent here, so let's just delete this line. And what we're going to go in and we'll make this tangent because we don't want that little dip. And you can see by making that tangent, it makes the other side tangent as well. What we can then also do by doing this method is dimension the center of that curve for there. Let us then trim this back. Because we actually are going to trim this back, we're going to lose this dimension, but we can just add it back in quickly enough. So let's just come in, select our trim. So sometimes for me, when I'm going fast, I don't dial all the numbers in 100%. I'll toss a dimension in, but then it'll get deleted, then I toss it back in. It's because I'm still playing around with it. I'm still adjusting it. I want to get some base proportions, but I can always come back and adjust that again later. So let us come back in, and we're going to dimension this diameter. And then that's just going to kind of lock everything else up. So as we say this, what we can now do is take a look and make sure that we're getting things, correct. So again, I build, I evaluate, and then I refine. So it may seem like an extra step, but before I get too far down, I want to make sure that this is going to be in the proportions or the areas that I want it. So we know it's going to be a circular sketch pattern, so let's just toss that in. So first thing it wants is what is the axis point it's going to revolve around, and then what are the entities we're going to revolve. So we want to select that, that, and that, and we know that there's going to be 5, so let's just hit OK, and then we can start taking a look at it. You can see our sketch is quite a bit off. So we're going to drive forward with the 2D sketch and SolidWorks to make sure we have what we want. So the next part is going to be ensuring that we get this cut out correct. So let's go in and take a look. We want to draw in our center line. So that we can get our dimensions accurate. Let us kind of rough some things in here. We've got this one, and we've got our next line here. We know that these are going to be parallel, so let's just add those in now. Let's make sure we have our dimensional offsets. So let's just say that's going to be 0.5. You know what, let's go with a 0.6. Okay, so we've got that right, we've got that right. We're just going to delete that. Let's come in. Let's go with extend entities. So again, you can see that we're really off on our sketch, but we're not going to worry too much about that. So now let's just make sure that we've got that right. Looks good. We can add in our radius, however we want to do that. We'll trim this line back. Again, let's go in, make sure, oh, you can see here I'm not doing a very good job of getting things tangent when I do these. So let's just trim this line back here. Now my 2D sketching skills in SolidWorks, I'm a little sloppy, so engineers kind of would probably cringe as they looked at me doing this. Let's get it a little bit tighter. There, we're going to say that's good enough. So here's the thing now. I could revolve this pattern around and make sure that, you know, I do this all in one quick cut. But then if I do that, what's going to happen is I'll have to go in and add all these radiuses within the 3D model. I could put all those radiuses in here now, but again, I like to kind of see what it's going to look like in the 3D model and adjust. So even though this is all my construction work, I'm going to actually go back in. I'll trim things out here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just delete all the geometry that I don't want. Oops. And there is a perfect example of some struggles with SolidWorks. So it's just hung up on me. So bear with me while I reboot and we'll start the recording again. Okay, and we're back. So what we're going to do is continue to delete this information that we don't want. So many different ways to do this a lot quicker than what I do, but I'm not going for speed right now. Oops, but there's a problem with how you do it too. So let's edit that. We're going to come in and delete these things. So what I've got now is I've got my items that I'm going to use for my extrude cut, and then I'm going to revolve them as a pattern. So let's get out of here. And what we're going to do is we can turn off this sketch plane. So let's just get rid of that. We'll hide it. We'll bring up our body. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do our extrude cut. We're going to use that sketch plane or that sketch. We actually want to toss that in as well. So let me just go back here. We're going to go extrude cut. We'll use that sketch. We've got our predetermined amount that we're going to go down in. Let's just say that's going to be a 2.5. Now this is where what we want to do at this point is we want to add our draft so that we know that it can be pulled. So let's come in. We'll say, where's our draft direction? There we go. I have a hard time seeing things, so I'm going to over exaggerate to make sure I'm going in the right direction. And we've got that there. So let's say we'll accept, and we can kind of look at that. Looks a little bit deep for me. So let's just kind of reduce that a little bit. and let's just go with a 2. Now we've got this set up. Let's toss in some of our radiuses here quickly, just to see what we like on these parts. So we'll come in. We'll increase those here. Let's get them to be, we'll say 0.5. Seems maybe a little bit big, but we're going to go with that for now. Again, when you do your model, you can adjust it. So we've got that. Let's add in our top radiuses or our bottom radiuses here along this face. So instead of clicking an edge, you can also just click a face. Oops, grab the wrong thing there. These we want to drop it down to maybe be 0.125, and I'm just tossing out random numbers here. Let's toss in these top radiuses as well. We're going to make those a little bit tighter even. And now we've got those first parts. So now let's do our revolve cut and see how it looks when we go in here with our features. So we're going to come in, go from a linear pattern, and we're going to go to a circular pattern. This time we want to ask a direction. So we've already created our reference geometry. So we're going to grab that. You can see it's asking to do a whole lot of stuff. So let us just get rid of that out. And what we want to do is we're going to go features and faces. So we want to do the extrude cut along with the fillets. We only want to do 5 so that we can take a look and see if we're getting what we want. So there, we've got it. It looks pretty good. So it's giving us an error here. So let's try to go in and do bodies. Oh, let's go back in. So there, you know, again, it's always fun when you look at stuff. Let's select the axis again. So the problem that we were having is when we were first trying to revolve it, let's just go back here and I'll show you, is that for somehow under the features and faces, I actually had in the revolve or the axis added into it, which was going to prevent it from going. So again, you know, when you see this, go back and make sure that you've got everything that you need and that there's nothing in there that you don't need. So let's go back, we're done. And we're going to say, okay, so we've started getting our tire here. Let's go to the front plane. And that's that's the look that we're going for. We may still want to go back in and say, you know what, this space is a little bit too big. Based on that, what we can do is go back. We know what our tire revolve is. We can see that. Go back, adjust our sketch. This feels like it's way too long, so let's kind of bring this down. We're going to bring this out so we get much more of a direct angle. Still looks like it's too much of a swoop and not of a hard enough edge. So again, we can go back in, adjust it, and this is where it's nice to do your sketches. So it may be that instead of doing this, we can still use this as reference. What we're going to do is we're going to come in and we'll do a line here, and we're going to do more of an angle. So instead of having it curve fully 100%, let's have it go in as a straight line. So we'll delete that out. and we're going to have it go as a straight line there. We'll add in our spline. We'll go back, we'll add in our tangency. Oh, let's make that vertical again. So still not feeling the way it should, but I think for now that's going to be good enough. We can always go back and refine it later when we get the whole thing laid in. So you can see that we kind of lost a little bit of stuff going on in here, which is something that can naturally happen when we're doing this. So it's easy enough to roll back. Some fillet items are no longer in the model, so let's go back and edit. And I think what's happened is it doesn't like that we've lost some faces. So by going in and editing, you can see what it's missing, and you can see the red line that shows up. So let's just clear those remaining out. And what we can do is just quickly drop those back in. So whenever you go back in your history tree to edit things, you always run the risk that that's going to happen. Now, once that's back in, we're good to go. So the next thing that we want to do is just quickly show how to do a offset cut for the pattern for the tires and the tread. So let us just make sure, as always, we've been going for quite a while here. So let's save. And we're just going to call this tire 1. And then what we want to do is we want to do a pattern for the tread, and we want to do up off the top. So let's just come in, and we can actually, instead of creating more planes, what we can do is we could use this plane. So we could either create a reference plane and bring it up the top, or what we can do is we can use this plane, and let me just do a sketch here, and I'll show you what I mean. So we're going to come in and let us just create anything that is going to be our pattern here. So we're just going to do a quick pattern. Again, it's up to you guys to, kind of create your own pattern, have some fun with it as you build the model. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an extrude cut. But instead of off the sketch plane, we're going to go off of a offset. So what that means is it's going to start at an offset point. So let's just kind of bring it all the way up here. We're going to say it's 9 inches. And that, what it does is it's the same as creating a plane. So it's going to say that it's going to start doing the offset cut from up at this point. Now, if we adjust this, we can see that this is where it's starting. That is 9 inches off of this plane. What this does is it just helps to reduce the number of planes that you may create for your modeling. It helps to keep the overall environment a little bit cleaner. So we've got a direction. So blind means that it's just going to be whatever dimension you choose. What we can also choose though is up to a surface. So you can do that and select that surface. Now we want to actually cut through it. So we want to actually go offset from a surface. So here we're going to say our tire tread, the depth of it is going to be 0.1. Oops, and we're offset from the wrong direction, so let's reverse the offset. So you can see I said 0.1, but it's doing the offset vertically. We want to go in the opposite direction. So we'll reverse offset. We'll do our cut. We'll determine, is that deep enough? Is it not deep enough? For this intents and purposes, we're fine. So what we're next going to do is, let's say treads all have a slightly different pattern on them. Some are deeper, some are not. That's just the design of the tires. So let's go in and do another cut wherein the tread maybe is not as deep as that one. So what we'll do now, and I'm being somewhat, oops. Okay, so we're going to say that that's going to be the next one. We're going to take the exact same approach that we did before. We are going to go with a cut. We're going to use a offset. We know that 9 inches is what we used last time. So it's going to start up there. We're then going to do offset from a surface. We'll select that surface. Let's make sure that we're going in the right direction. You can see that we're going in the wrong direction, so we'll reverse that. And instead of 0.1, let's do 0.05. We'll accept that. Now what we've got is we've got our patterns or our tread detail that has different depths to it. That is, just to get a little bit more realism for the product. So what we want to do now is let's toss in our radiuses. So we'll come over and we're going to, the more common radii that we put in, then the easier it is when we go and we revolve our cuts. Oh, let's delete that face so we can get back what we want. We're just doing edges. So we're going to say that's what we want. We'll hit accept. Then we'll do our radiuses up on the top and the bottom. These ones are going to be just a little bit tighter. So we'll do that face. We'll do that face. We're going to make it like 0.101. We'll also do this line here and this line here. We're not going to worry about that. So there we've got it. Now what we've done is we've done 4 commands. So we want to revolve those as a pattern. So we're going to go circular pattern. First thing, let's pick our direction, which is going to be our axis again. Then we're going to come in and go features and faces. So let's just pull down our part menu. We've got these 4. And now it's a matter of how much do we want it. Now this is something, maybe it's already been told to you. We're going to assume for this car, we're just kind of going to do what looks good for us. Now, we've got that going. Let's say we also want to be a little bit tidier with our car body. We're going to come in and we're going to select these 4 items. Just to make things easier to find, we're going to add them to a new folder. And we're just going to call it tire tread. What that does is if you want to go back, or someone wants to go back and edit these tire treads, they know exactly where they can go within your parts. So it just makes life a little bit easier. So you can kind of see how our tire is starting to come together. Well, as mentioned before, we want to use these tires to get our proportions for our body correct. Now, we haven't sketched out the profiles for the body yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to use these tires as an underlay to get the proportions right. So we know that the width of our tires, we've already determined, was the 12 inches. So what we can do is just come in and offset it. We're going to mirror that over, and we'll mirror it over this plane. Oops. Let's get the right piece here. Oh, there we go. So we're getting the error, and instead of actually stopping to read the error, I assumed I did something wrong. So always read the errors. I've left it so that it's trying to merge a solid on. Let's turn that off. And then now we've got our left and right tire, but we also want to get our back tire. So again, just to kind of walk through a demonstration here, we've kind of talked about this before, wherein what usually happens is that the diameter or the length of the body is determined by the wheels. And when I see people doing concept sketches, what happens is that the wheels are usually, or the length of the car is usually that it is 3 diameters of the tires in between. So I'm just roughing this in here a little bit. So we can see that that's going to be our proportions. What we're going to do is we'll just dump in a quick reference plane here. We'll go insert reference geometry plane. We're going to go down to a point. You know, we're looking at that. The distance is 142.25. Good enough. Now let's again mirror our two bodies here. We'll go off of this plane. And now you can see what we're going to be able to do is use this to create our concept sketch elevation views for the body. And we're going to be a little bit more precise on it because we've got things laid out. So again, you know, if you're building this along with me, go back in, you know, have some fun, get your treads in there, work out some of the details, get in some more of the, you know, the lug nuts and that in there. So for the next video, what we're going to be doing is, you know, I'll have these tires all finished out, and then we will start doing the sketching. I'll show a couple, you know, just quick rough sketches that I do to get my elevations done, and we'll start building the body. So if you like this video or this series, please subscribe to my channel. And feel free to pass these on or the links on to people that you think may benefit from it. Excellent. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.